I suppose it's like going and seeing the Mona Lisa for the first time after it's just been lost for 80 years, because this plate has disappeared for 80 years. It was believed to exist. It may be here, it may have been destroyed, and there it is. You're holding it in your hands. I mean, what a privilege. What an honour to see it, to examine it, to handle it, to look at it through a magnifying glass and say, yes, this is the real thing. It's just a thrill of that will never leave you, and this will always be, for me, one of the highlights of a philatelic lifetime.
The island of Mauritius, named by the Dutch who owned it between 1598 and 1710 in honour of their stadtholder, Count Maurice of Nassau, lies in the South Indian Ocean, to the east of Madagascar. Both islands, with some smaller companions, being the highest portions of an otherwise totally submerged continental landmass, now lying fathoms deep beneath the blue waters which lap Africa on the west and Java on the east. Discovered by the Portuguese sailor Mascarenhas in 1505, the island had, apparently, no earlier visitors. It was then a thick tangle of virgin forest, encouraged by a subtropical sun and regular rainfall. It had never known a tree feller's axe. There was a potential wealth in its rich soil, but the Portuguese pirate explorers were chasing rather actual than potential wealth. They marked the island on their charts as Ilha do Cerne and abandoned it. When the Dutch, who had succeeded to the Portuguese as the dominant imperial power of the East Indies, arrived on Ilha do Cerne, they could see value in other treasures than gold. They could see, too, the immense tactical importance that Mauritius's geographical position gave to it in relation to schemes of empire building. To control Mauritius would be to control the sea routes which led from the Cape to the Muslim cities of East Africa and the Red Sea. Yet, for all its strategic importance, for all the rich promise of its earth, Mauritius was neglected by its Dutch owners in favour of bases and settlements which seemed to offer superior advantages. And, just as the Portuguese had abandoned the island, so eventually did the Dutch. The difference being that the Portuguese abandoned it on first sight, the Dutch after 100 years. But in the century that had passed, two other great imperial powers had arisen to challenge, to equal, and to finally overtake the achievements of the Portuguese and the Dutch, the French and the British empires. 5 years after the Dutch tricolour had been hauled down, the French formally took possession of the island in the name of King Louis XV and renamed it Île-de-France. While it prospered under the French, the British government had its eye upon the island, for what the British had made of Gibraltar in its relation to the Mediterranean Sea, the French had made of Mauritius in relation to an ocean far more spacious and not less strategically and commercially important, and by 1810, after a few naval battles, the island was in British hands. All that the British government did to record the change of ownership was to alter the name, Island of France, to its old Dutch name of Mauritius. Sir William Gom, a soldier of most distinguished record, had been appointed to the governorship of the island in 1842. Among the first of the island's weaknesses to attract his critical eye was the post office. Primitive and ill-run, lodged in the back room of a shop and managed by a single person. The letters received from the ships were either retained at the office to be called for, or else delivered in black boxes to various parts of the capital, the recipients of the parcels undertaking to deliver such of letters as remained after they had taken their own. Sir William had no sooner made himself acquainted with the sorry condition of the island's postal system than he took action to remedy it. He issued an ordinance, number 13, dated December the 17th, 1846, which fixed the rate of internal postage and stated that adhesive stamps must be affixed to postage, such stamps being provided by the government. The governor, in his search for a model to serve as the inspiration of his new stamps pattern, had the very best that this world has ever had to offer. For the history of both printing and of stamps has this fact to show, that the very first essay in the new art produced the forever incomparable masterpiece. No printer since has equaled the perfection that Nicholas Jensen achieved in the splendid drawn of the typographical art, and no stamp since has even faintly rivaled the cold, clear, delicate beauty of the Wyan Corbould Heath Penny Black, the first stamp ever to be issued. Yes, the governor had his model. What he now had to seek was the Mauritian equivalent of the immortal Penny Black. His search was to lead to nothing which rivaled the beauty of the model that Sir William had in mind, but to the production of something which, for all its lack of artistic worth, was, in a different fashion, to acquire fame not less equal to that of its great original.
The issue is, of course, one of the most fantastic in the world. Very few exist. Long time ago, produced in a fascinating place, remote from printing. So the printing plate was always going to be something that was important. And it has this wonderful history of disappearing, reappearing in 1912, reprints made, the printer gets the printer arrested in Paris. The plate is around for a while, it disappears in 1935, it reappears wonderfully just recently. It's just got magic, majesty, romance. It's a fantastic thing, and there is the story. It's unique, it's special.
After Great Britain in 1840, Zurich, Brazil and Geneva in 1843, Basel in 1845 and the United States earlier in 1847, Mauritius became, in September 1847, the 7th territory in the world and the first British colony to have issued postage stamps. In November 1846, the government of the island asked Joseph Osmond Barnard, an English jeweller and watchmaker who travelled to Mauritius as a stowaway in 1838, to provide an estimate for the engraving of a printing plate and the printing of stamps of two values, 1 penny and 2d. In his estimate, he gave a price of 10 shillings per thousand for printing the stamps and £10 for engraving the plate. His proposal was accepted by the authorities, and Barnard started working on the engraving of a small piece of copper. He engraved just one image of the 1 penny and one of the 2d stamps. It may be unique in philately that the post office issue of postage stamps is printed in sheets of just one. A widespread theory, taken as truth until not long ago, goes that while engraving the negative design of the stamps on the copper plate, Barnard first set about carving the Queen's heads, then added the legends, postage on the top, 1 penny and 2d on the bottom, and Mauritius on the left-hand side, leaving the right-hand side empty. The watchmaker had forgotten the wording. The story continues that Barnard left his shop and walked across to ask the postmaster what was to be written on the left-hand side of the stamps. And just as he reached his destination, he saw, attached to the front of the building, a board which carried the legend, Post Office. He went no further, retracted his steps, and engraved the two words in the spaces which remained on the unfinished designs. Seemingly the truth, though less romantic, is that the engraving of these words onto the plate clearly follows the precedent of the wording on the island's postal markings of those days. In all, just 500 stamps were printed of both values, 350 of each value by the 20th of September 1847, and these were first used the following day to post invitations for a ball at the Government House to be held on the 30th of September. These stamps were available for sale and use to the public on the 22nd of September. Clearly, the volume of mail requiring stamps was in excess of the numbers available, and the capacity to print them, one at a time, by the intaglio method. Thus it was that in January 1848, the Agent General for Crown Colonies in London requisitioned new postage stamps for Mauritius, which were eventually issued in 1858. Demand during the intervening years was fulfilled again by Barnard by engraving, individually in sheets of 12, the 1848 post-paid issue. Following the introduction of Barnard's plate of 12 stamps, the post office plate apparently disappeared from view. Its reappearance in London in 1912 caused much interest in the philatelic world. It had apparently been in the possession of Colonel Dominic Henry Colnaghi, said to be a grandson of Sir William Gone, and was stored in Drummond's Bank in Charing Cross, London. Studies now demonstrate that Colnaghi was not directly related to the Gone family, and the evidence that we have today about the plate's reappearance leaves many questions unanswered. Neville Lacey Stocken, a London-based stamp dealer, relates in his memoirs that he purchased the plate from Colnaghi, who had taken it to the Army and Navy stores in Victoria Street to seek information. A friend of Stocken, who worked there, alerted him, after which they closed a deal for a consideration in cash. He later attempted to sell the plate and showed it to Henry Joseph Duveen, then president of the Royal Philatelic Society, London, who showed it to King George V. None expressed an interest in its purchase, even though by that time it was already considered as the most valuable piece of copper in the world. It was finally sold to David Field, another of Stocken's friends, who sold it to Sidney Loder. It would appear that the plate then disappears, if not still in the ownership of Loder, until it was exhibited at the Berlin Philatelic Exhibition, I-Poster, in 1930, where it was shown in a special safe, together with 6 other major items. At about the same time as its exhibition in Berlin, it was sold via H.R. Harmer to the Alsace philatelist Maurice Burrus. The plate was exhibited by Burrus at the Royal Jubilee exhibition of British Empire stamps of the Victorian era, organised by the Royal Philatelic Society London in May 1935.
Maurice Burrus, qui était mon parrain et dont je suis le petit-neveu, donc c'était mon grand-oncle, a été, dit-on, le plus grand collectionneur de timbres au monde après la reine d'Angleterre. Il a commencé sa collection, je crois, à l'âge de 14 ans. Et à l'époque, il collectionnait d'ailleurs les livres anciens, les timbres et les meubles. Je crois que c'est surtout dans les années 1920 que sa collection s'est accélérée lorsqu'il a pu racheter la collection Ferrari. Mais mon grand-oncle était célibataire. Mon père, qui s'est occupé de la succession de mon oncle en 1959 à son décès, était donc son neveu. Et c'est mon père et ses 3 sœurs qui ont hérité de mon grand-oncle. On ne sait pas beaucoup de choses à propos de sa vie parce que mon grand-oncle ne voyait pas beaucoup mon grand-père avant la guerre. À la guerre, mon grand-père a recueilli mon grand-oncle à Lyon, puisque l'Alsace était en zone occupée. Et la collection de timbres de mon grand-oncle était à Lausanne, puisque mon grand-oncle avait une maison avenue Sainte-Luce. Et il gardait la collection dans des bibliothèques et dans un coffre-fort dans sa maison. Et véritablement, la connaissance de mon grand-oncle comme collectionneur, nous le savons plus au travers des articles qui ont été publiés à son sujet. Mes tantes avaient gardé toutes les archives historiques et notamment les mémoires de mon grand-oncle que j'ai retrouvées au décès de mes tantes. Mais malheureusement, il y a une masse de documents à lire que je n'ai pas eu le temps de lire. Et donc, pour savoir si dans les mémoires de mon grand-oncle et de mon grand-père, on va trouver quelque chose sur l'histoire des timbres, eh bien, il faut attendre un petit peu que j'ai le temps de trier tous ces documents.
When Maurice Burrus died in 1959, his philatelic collections were sold through some 75 spectacular auctions. The Mauritius section was sold by Robson Lowe Limited on the 1st of October 1963 in London. The plate was thought to be in Burrus' possession until this auction came about, and as it was not offered, the philatelic world started wondering if it might have been lost at some point after Burrus' death. Philatelic experts, writers and collections could do no more than hope for an eventual reappearance or resign themselves to a permanent loss. On the 3rd of November 1993, David Feldman S.A. offered the Canaille Mauritius collection in Zurich for auction. A well-known stamp expert and dealer based in Geneva, Mr. Alain van der Weyde, assisted the event. He had always had a suspicion that the plate was still in the possession of the Burrus family. Such an important piece of philatelic history could not be lost just like that. The results of the auction, in which the Bordeaux cover, ex-Burrus, fetched a record price of over £2.6 million, inspired van der Weyde to search for the plate. He began by calling Odile and Bernadette Burrus, two of Maurice's nieces, whom he suspected had the plate. They did not let him know for certain if they had it or not, and they never did. Bearer of a persevering spirit, on several occasions he gave the sisters a ring asking for the plate, getting always an answer left up in the air.
La plaque qui a servi à imprimer les timbres de l'île Maurice a été retrouvée dans le cadre de la succession parmi tous les albums de timbres. Et c'est ma tante Odile Burrus qui a souhaité garder cette plaque en souvenir de mon oncle. Donc lors du partage, elle a été attribuée à Odile Burrus qui l'a gardée soigneusement.
Van der Weyde had to wait until Odile's death on the 29th of November 2013 to get the answer for which he had been waiting. He contacted Paul Burrus, Bernadette and Odile's brother, only to find out what he had suspected was true. Odile had the plate all along. It was given to her by her uncle and found by family members between her personal affairs, wrapped in a folded piece of regular white paper with the inscription Plaque Oncle Maurice, handwritten on it with a ballpoint pen, and a small O for Odile written with pencil on the right-hand top corner.
Lors de la succession de mon oncle avait notamment une collection de timbres sur l'île Maurice et la plaque était parmi les autres mais sans véritablement indication. Et donc lorsque ma tante Odile Burrus est décédée, lorsque j'ai trié ses affaires, j'ai retrouvé cette petite plaque qui est finalement un petit morceau de cuivre de 5 cm sur 10. Je l'ai retrouvée au fond d'un coffre. Et je n'ai jamais deviné l'importance de cette plaque, sauf que quand mon père a fait le partage, il l'avait emballée et il avait écrit de sa main plaque île Maurice. Et je me suis dit que si mon père avait pris le soin de l'emballer et d'écrire cette annotation, c'est que ça avait quand même quelque chose qui avait d'importance. Je me demande si je l'avais trouvée comme ça au fond d'un coffre sans rien, elle serait peut-être passée à la poubelle. Donc j'ai dit cette plaque est miraculeuse parce qu'elle n'est pas passée loin d'une fin certaine. Donc je crois que je remercie mon père de cette annotation lors du partage de 1960 qui était finalement très précieuse. Et j'imagine que dans des successions, souvent les héritiers trouvent des petites choses comme ça et ils ne savent pas l'importance à accorder. Grâce à vous, Monsieur Torel, j'ai découvert l'importance dans le monde philatélique que représente cette plaque.
Reckoning that they might have an important philatelic item in their hands, but without an actual awareness of the true worth of the little piece of copper, the Burrus family, through Paul Burrus and his son Jean-Paul, approached David Feldman S.A. in Geneva for guidance and expertise. It was decided then to exhibit it for the benefit of philately, for such a significant item in the history of stamp making should be shared with the world, starting on May the 13th, 2015, at the EUROPHILEX London 2015 exhibition.
Heureusement qu'elle était emballée. Hein. Parce que vous voyez dans un coffre un petit machin comme ça, qui est épais comme ça.
Gosh, that was easier than I thought. Must be your charming manner, relaxed atmosphere. I'll have the free water now.